Okay, I've been getting quite a bit of requests on things how I manage and what I do with AI assistant development and how exactly I use Claude Code and Codex in combination to do the stuff on the project, including the regular vibe coding and obviously the actual AI assisting coding, which are like basically different flavors of the same thing. But today I'm going to show you how I actually build features and change stuff and how that affects an actual coding processes that you will see. So I have a project here which is going to be based on the open source voice layer for the AI agents called Sina. And you can see Sina.ai and use it to build your next voice AI agent. So I'm building a new project on top of that, which is going to be some kind of a phone call scheduler. And that's going to be a separate product. And to have a specific feature is done. So I have a schedule assistant for days and weekdays. And for that, I'm using a separate database, which is, you can see now, the LLM actually made a quite stupid thing. I forgot to specifically give a database structure in the beginning. So LLM actually decided to create a schedule of the day as a separate table, which is completely unnecessary, and down the line this is obviously gonna hurt a lot from structural perspective. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this schedule day schema that we have for the Prisma inside our Next.js application and ask the Codex to do the comprehensive research from the project and understand what needs to be done in order to remove that and integrate that with an actual scheduler table rather than having completely separate table for that, because it's really just pinpointing a specific days of the week. It can be just an array inside this scheduler table or just a JSON field. So here's the interesting part. So until this point, I kind of explained that, hey, we don't need this and we just need an array inside the schedule model. But because we do have already a bunch of code base written regarding this schedule day model, we need to make sure that it's not going to affect the existing functionality. So in other words, we are going to reuse a bunch of stuff that we already done, but at the same time we're hinting the Codex that, hey, take a look at the Cloud MD file, which I use as a primary guideline for conducting everything regarding this project, including the project overview, commands, the actual project structure, all of the references, theme guides, etc. So everything that relates to this project, including the cursor rules, I'm keeping here as a reference. So whenever the Codex or Claude or even Cursor takes a look in this file, they immediately have all of the references needed to complete any task. So in this case, I want to ask Codex to actually output the actual to-do list task items, so that later on I can provide each individual task to the Claude itself to perform an action. So over the months of experience, I noticed that the actual Codex is way better on actual code research and task composing compared to Claude. Claude is way better and faster to actually change that code and implement the tasks. So in this case, I'm going to ask Codex to output task to-do files. So this is an actual role for the Codex to understand what it does. So this essentially makes sure that Codex, whenever composes the tasks, they will reference best practice guides from Claude MD, because in Claude MD I have specifically defined best practice guidelines, how to use Next.js with server-side rendering or client components, how to use MobX that I use for store, how to use ShadCN, especially with ShadCN components. Like, we don't want to repeat components again. So this is really helps to guide the LLM what to use when and how to access the actual documentation. For example, in ShadCN, you will see that there is a bunch of rules defined. For example, all the primitives are going to go in this directory, etc. This is not something that I have created manually, to be honest, because most of this is available online, or you can even generate that with the Claude desktop app or ChatGPT. Doesn't matter. This is like highly generic stuff, but this really helps to narrow down the niche. Whenever LLM wants to touch some of the React components, it understands that, hey, I have to look up if there is a ShadCN component for this. If yes, then use the ShadCN component instead of creating new one completely from scratch. So those type of things help to narrow down the implementation niche. So in this case, I'm going to continue. After describing role, now I have to explain what's going to be the actual output. Okay, now that you see the entire output structure, this is how essentially I'm guarding Codex to follow the prompt. So I'm essentially telling that, hey, you have to create task files inside to-do folder. This is going to be used later on to feed one by one, and the actual part that's available and that's essentially giving us ability to feed one by one is the part that we make sure that we can give tasks synchronously one by one. So I'm going to make it a little bit more big to understand well, but this structure essentially going to be my main prompt for the codex. So I'm going to jump to the codex, and cursor makes this terribly bad because they hide it codex and Claude icons from here. So now what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to copy paste the entire prompt here, and codex will ideally generate the actual task to-do files inside the to-do folder. While this is happening, I'm going to explain what's going to be happening next. So I have this very simple bash script, which is essentially lists all of the tasks inside the to-do folder and then feeds that either to the Claude or Codex, depending on which one I want to execute. So this keeps each individual task completely separate from the rest. So I'm not feeding everything at once because the changes might be way more than an actual context can handle, or even if they are not, making separate things at once always breaks the model reasoning process. That's why I'm separating those in very small chunks, very small tasks, and each and every time I'm not pre-prompting or saying continue or something like that. This is like just literally taking the file content and giving to the Claude as a command line argument, which eventually executes Claude or Codex directly on the text rather than giving the entire to-do list items. And because we have in git ignore all the to-do tasks and the results, we essentially making sure that the Claude or Codex never access the rest of the tasks and they keep them always focused on the current task. So that's the overall goal of doing this, right? Because in an actual development scenario as well, when there is a specific thing to do, as a software engineer, you always focus on one thing at a time and then move forward based on the changes. That helps with the focus in general and also productivity. Exactly the same principle with this AI assisted development. Focusing on specific tasks and describing each task at a time. So as you can see, the to-do list task items are coming out. So Codex is doing quite a good job from perspective of what to do. So the goal, it describes the goal we had that, and the context, the entire context with all of the references from the Cloud's MD file, so that it understands really well on what to do. So it understood that we have a Prisma with SQLite for the development. So, and it knows that SQLite does not have an array field, so it adds a JSON instead. So all those things are essentially shortcuts for the model that we pick later on to execute. Already has the entire information. We don't have to explain this again and again. So this is the refactor server side, and then task 3, align code, docs, and design. So this makes sure that everything is aligned after that. So what I'm gonna do now, so I don't need the Codex anymore. It did the job. I closing that one, and then what I'm gonna do is actually run my custom script, which is basically just taking each to-do list item one at a time and then prompting that directly to the Claude or Codex. Doesn't matter which one you run. I just found out that within a couple of months of experience, Codex is great on describing tasks and doing project-based research, and Claude is very good at actually implementation. So it started processing from task 1, and just for the reference, I also have this result 1 MD, which is going to be the final output from Claude that I'm capturing from the Claude's command output, just in case to have a reference what have been done. Because at some point, if there's a bug or like some reference is broken, I'm going to essentially direct Claude saying that, hey, you had this output in the past, explore what's going on based on the tasks. So that way we can always keep a context alive instead of having a separate executions all the time and keeping everything in one chat. So this is basically the flow that I am following all the time, no matter what type of project I am doing or features I'm building. You should imagine that describing a feature or what needs to be done is still on something that I do manually. It's nothing is automated there, but essentially the actual tasks that have been written for an actual implementation is usually done with the Codex. So Codex has a really good context from that perspective. You can see that it already started to do changes, and this might take a while. I had cases where it took overnight execution, especially if this is a big feature and I have too many tasks filed. This can take a couple of hours or even a full day. So I had that experiences, but I'm on Cloud Max, so I don't care that much. I never hit the limits. So this way I ensure that it works. So while Claude is working and we still have a couple of tasks left to complete, I want to talk a little bit about the Sina.ai or GitHub project open source that I have. I'm almost to the 100 stars, so make sure to hit that star button. This is essentially a unified text-to-speech, speech-to-text version for the voice layer for the agent. So this allows you to essentially add the voice on top of the existing AI agents that you have, no matter which framework you use, and you control the agent's logic. This project just streams the audio, make sure that turn detection works, there is a noise suppression, and there is a telephony configured automatically. Check out the project. If you are interested, hit me up. I'm really eager to talk to anyone who is interested in this. It produces the this migration file just to do the migration. And yeah, obviously this was one-time thing. It already did the migration. So I can just run to see the changes, if there's anything left to be done. So let's see, run dev. Okay, so I have this schedule, and I have days, and they have been saved. Okay, so everything worked. From coding perspective, nothing really major here to be done. Well, I have to still add more entities. I just have this schedule, but from the actual functionality perspective, it did the job. It figured out that the SQLite does not support an array, so it added a JSON field, which is correct. For the dev, right now I'm using SQLite, but I'm going to switch to Postgres. This is something that I'm going to do later on, so it doesn't really matter right now. But from implementation perspective, you see that it took a while, but I have 0 code-based touches on this kind of a difficult implementation, because the actual codex figured out every single place. It did a research, figured out every single place what needs to be done, but an actual implementation have been split into very small pieces of the implementation. And in fact, the codex did a really good job explaining what are the end result requirements. So that's this third task for the Claude have been just verifying that everything was correct. So this essentially made a huge burden on the Claude to actually verify everything, because we have the MobX pattern, everything had to be correct. And the good part is that there is a specific references of what to look for. So the Claude does not burn more tokens to understand what to do. That's the whole point of separating this into simple, smaller chunks of tasks. So this is my main workflow. And as you can see, running these tasks in sequential mode might take some time, which is kind of good thing, right? You can run this and go grab a coffee or do something else, or like answer redundant phone calls that you always get. Who knows what you can do. But the goal here is that achieve to some point of level of confidence that the tasks that are being implemented are the same as they are described. And when the codex writes the tasks, you can always review them. And if something is bad, you can course correct. And the good thing with Codex task guidelines is that whenever you describe, it really does a good job on the planning aspect on what to do if you define the correct roles. In this case, it was just a project manager. For some cases, it might be a DevOps engineer where you want to separate and write the deployment scripts, etc. But the concept stays exactly the same. Codex generates tasks from the requirements you give, and then Claude executes one by one, having only that file in a context. That's the huge important thing. We're not giving everything at once and say, implement this. Current way of doing a planning mode, for example, in Claude or any coding assistant nowadays, or even Cursor, they actually produce one single file for those tasks, which is quite bad if you have features to re-implement. That's it for now. I'm gonna keep you posted on this project, which is called Latest Call, and it's quite interesting one. I'm building a call scheduler essentially that's gonna call you or anyone else in periodic way to remind or something, or even do an alarm clock calls. So I'm still figuring out things as we go, but this is essentially my project on top of the open source Sina to make a phone calls, get the audio working with AI agents, etc. So this is just the web app portion right now. So follow for more.